It was a cold, gray morning when life broke beneath the weight of cruelty. Rain fell softly over the cracked pavement outside St. William's Medical Center, where a frail man named Daniel sat hunched on the hospital steps. His face, pale and thin, told stories of sleepless nights and silent suffering. The medical folder in his trembling hands had only one word stamped across it in red: denied. He had cancer, and without treatment, only weeks left to live. Yet the clinic that once promised care had turned him away, choosing profit over compassion. Before we go further, if you believe in kindness, in humanity, and in second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to KindHeartsHub. Your single action can help spread the power of hope and goodness in a world that desperately needs it. Daniel had once been the kind of man who fixed bikes for neighborhood kids and helped stray animals find food on cold nights. A mechanic by trade, he spent his days surrounded by grease, gears, and laughter in a small repair shop he'd built with his father years ago. But cancer crept in quietly, stealing his strength, his savings, and eventually, his dignity. When his health insurance lapsed after months of missed payments, the hospital stopped his chemotherapy halfway through. They told him to return when he could afford it, knowing he never could. He walked home that evening through empty streets, his chest heavy not just with illness but with disbelief. Inside his small apartment, old photographs hung crookedly. His wife Sarah smiling before she passed away in an accident years ago, their young daughter Lily beaming beside a pink bicycle he'd repaired for her. Now Lily was 17, working part-time at a diner to help pay rent, pretending she wasn't scared every time her father coughed too hard. Days blurred into each other. Daniel grew weaker, yet his eyes still held the quiet fire of a man who refused to surrender completely. One evening he went to his garage one last time. The air smelled of oil and rust, memories of better days clinging to every tool and tire. He began fixing a broken motorcycle someone had abandoned years ago, a project he'd never finished. His hands shook, his breath short, but he kept going. Perhaps it was hope, or maybe denial, that made him believe if he could fix that bike, something inside him might heal too. Lily found him there late that night, collapsed beside the half-fixed bike, his hands stained with oil and tears. The next morning, when she tried again at the hospital, pleading with the receptionist to help her father, she was told coldly that policy is policy. No exceptions. She stood there frozen as people walked past her, each carrying their own lives, while hers quietly crumbled. That was when fate intervened, in the loud, thunderous form of motorcycle engines. A week later, Daniel's old friend Mark stopped by. He was part of a local biker group known as Iron Hearts. They weren't your typical bikers. Sure, they looked rough leather jackets and tattoos and roaring engines, but they were the kind who stopped traffic to help a lost dog, or organized rides to raise funds for children's hospitals. When Mark heard what happened, he gathered his group at their clubhouse that very night. "No one," he said, slamming his fist on the table, "no one should be left to die because they're poor." The following morning, the sound of dozens of motorcycles filled the air outside Daniel's building. Neighbors came out, startled, as a line of bikers in black jackets parked in perfect formation. Daniel, frail and confused, stepped outside, clutching his chest. Mark approached him with a smile that barely hid the tears in his eyes. "We're not letting you fight this alone," he said. What happened next would change not only Daniel's life but the hearts of an entire community. The Iron Hearts launched a campaign online titled Ride for Daniel. They shared his story, his pictures, and his plea for help. Within days, donations began pouring in from strangers across the world, a few dollars here, 100 there, each message filled with prayers, love, and outrage at the injustice he'd faced. The bikers didn't stop there. They rode together to St. William's Medical Center, 100 strong, engines rumbling like thunder across the city. They weren't there for violence. They came in peace, holding banners that read, "Compassion over profit," and "Every life deserves a chance." The media caught wind of it. Cameras flashed, reporters asked questions, and suddenly the same hospital that had once turned Daniel away was now under the nation's spotlight. Under pressure, and with donations covering the costs, the clinic had no choice but to reopen his case. They admitted him back for treatment, this time free of charge. But it wasn't just about the hospital anymore. It was about the thousands of people who watched from their screens, realizing how one act of cruelty had united so many hearts in defiance. Weeks passed. The treatment was painful, but Daniel endured it with a strength that seemed to grow from every message of support. The bikers visited often, filling his room with laughter and the smell of gasoline and leather. Lily smiled again for the first time in months. Sometimes she'd sit by the window with her father, watching the Iron Hearts ride through the streets, knowing that because of them, hope was alive again. Months later, when Daniel walked out of the hospital, thinner, weaker, but alive, the bikers were there waiting, engines roaring like a symphony of triumph. He raised his hand weakly, tears in his eyes, and mouthed the words, "Thank you." The crowd cheered, and even the doctors who had once turned him away stood silently, ashamed but awakened. That night, Daniel sat once again in his small garage. The old motorcycle he had once collapsed beside was now fully restored, polished chrome gleaming under the dim light. Mark handed him a helmet, the Iron Heart's emblem shining proudly on it. "You're one of us now," he said. Daniel smiled, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. He started the bike, the engine roaring to life like his own heart had been reborn. For the first time in a long while, he felt free. Sometimes the world feels cruel beyond repair. Sometimes it takes a roar of engines, a wave of strangers, and a spark of compassion to remind us that kindness still lives. Sometimes in leather jackets, sometimes in the hands of those who refuse to look away. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to KindHeartsHub. Help us spread stories that prove love and humanity still win, even when the world forgets. Special request: comment below what kindness means to you. Your words might inspire someone else to never give up.